I never told anyone the full truth about where the money came from. Not even David, my only child. He grew up thinking his father had been a quiet, hard-working engineer who died too young and left us comfortable. That was the story I let him keep, because the real one, how I turned a broke widow with a 2-year-old into the majority shareholder of a company that quietly owns half the warehouses on the East Coast, felt too sharp, too dangerous to hand a boy. Better he thought we were normal. Better he thought I was normal. So when he called me last spring and said, "Mom, I'm bringing Emily home to meet you, and then we're all having dinner with her parents," I heard the small shake in his voice that meant he was terrified I'd embarrass him. David had spent the last 10 years climbing the ladder at Harrison & Associates, the investment bank Emily's father founded. He wanted everything perfect. I understood. I also understood something he didn't. The Harrisons were about to measure me with the same tape they used on junior analysts, net worth first, humanity later, if ever. I decided to let them. I spent 3 weeks planning it. I went to the Goodwill in Richmond and bought a faded floral dress 2 sizes too big, a cardigan with pills on the elbows, and orthopedic shoes that squeaked. I practiced saying, "Pop," instead of "soda," in the mirror until it sounded natural again, the way it did when I was growing up in Appalachia before I married up, then built higher. I let my roots grow out gray for 6 months. I stopped wearing the diamond studs David gave me for my 60th and put in tiny fake pearls instead. When I looked at myself the night before the dinner, I saw exactly what I wanted them to see, a sweet, slightly confused older woman who still clipped coupons and thought Olive Garden was fancy. David picked me up in his BMW. He took one look at me and his mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Mom, are you okay? You look tired," I finished for him, patting his cheek with a hand I'd deliberately not moisturized in days. "Don't fuss. I'm just an old woman who doesn't see the point in dressing up for a family dinner." He swallowed whatever he'd been about to say and helped me into the car like I was made of blown glass. The Harrisons lived in McLean, Virginia, in one of those houses that tries to look old money but can't hide the new marble. The driveway alone could have parked 6 of the single-wide trailers I grew up in. David kept glancing at me as we pulled up, worry creasing his forehead. I gave him my best vacant smile and clutched the foil-covered Pyrex dish I'd brought, green bean casserole made with Campbell's soup and French's onions, the kind of thing people in their circle pretended they'd never eaten. Richard Harrison opened the door himself. Tall, silver-haired, still handsome in that predatory way men who summer in Nantucket never quite lose. His eyes flicked over me in one practiced sweep and the smile froze just enough to notice. "You must be Linda," he said, voice warm as a tax audit. Come in, come in. Emily's been dying to meet David's mother." The way he said, "David's mother," had the faintest emphasis, as if David had appeared fully formed from Harvard Business School and I was an unfortunate footnote. Victoria Harrison appeared next, wearing cream silk and the kind of perfume that costs more per ounce than most people's rent. She air-kissed somewhere near my cheek without actually making contact. "And this must be the famous casserole I've heard so much about," she said, taking the Pyrex between 2 fingers like it might be radioactive. How quaint. Emily looked like her mother, blonde, polished, perfect teeth, but her eyes kept darting to David, checking his reaction. I saw the exact moment she decided I was a liability. Her smile went brittle. We moved into the living room, all white furniture and abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint on canvas. I sat on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than my first house and folded my hands in my lap, knuckles deliberately prominent. Richard poured wine. When he got to me he held up the bottle, some 1996 Bordeaux that retails for 4 figures, and said, "Linda, I'm sure you'd prefer something lighter." "Oh, no thank you," I said, letting my accent thicken just a shade. "I don't drink much anymore. Doctor says it goes straight to my hips." I patted the hips in question, which were actually the result of daily 5-mile runs and a personal trainer named Marco who could make a Navy SEAL cry. Victoria laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Well, we all have to watch ourselves at our age, don't we?" I smiled the smile of a woman who hasn't understood the insult. Dinner was announced. The dining room table could have seated the Last Supper twice over. Name cards had been placed. Mine was between Richard and Victoria, perfect for observation. The first course was some kind of foam that tasted like lawn clippings. I took a tiny bite and said, loudly enough for the whole table to hear. My goodness, it's like eating a cloud. Back home we'd call this angel spit. David choked on his wine. Richard's mouth twitched. Where is home again, Linda? Little place called Grundy, Virginia. You probably never heard of it. Coal town. My daddy worked the mines till his lungs turned black. I paused, let my eyes go misty. Lost him when I was 14. Had to quit school and clean houses to keep food on the table for my brothers and sisters. Victoria made a sympathetic noise that didn't reach her eyes. How dreadful. And David's father died when David was 2. Heart attack. Left us with nothing but medical bills and a mortgage. I reached over and squeezed David's hand. He squeezed back automatically, the way he had when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. Emily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. David said his dad was an engineer. Oh, he was, honey, I said, beaming at her. Chemical engineer for DuPont. Good job, steady. But we still lived paycheck to paycheck. Some folks just know how to stretch a dollar better than others. Richard leaned forward. So you never remarried? Never found anyone who measured up to my Tommy, I said softly. Some loves only come once. Victoria actually looked touched for a second, then caught herself and reached for her wine. The main course was filet mignon with truffle reduction. I waited until everyone had been served, then said, this looks awful fancy. We usually just grilled steaks on the Foreman back home. You know, the one George Foreman sells on TV. Best $100 I ever spent. Emily made a small sound that might have been laughter or horror. Richard smoothly changed the subject to their recent trip to Gstaad. I let my eyes go wide. Switzerland, oh my stars. I've never been farther than Dollywood. Always wanted to see the ocean, but money's tight, you know. Social Security only goes so far. David tried to rescue me. Mom's being modest. She's always been thrifty. It's how she managed to put you through college without loans. I finished for him, patting his cheek again. Worked 3 jobs some years. Cleaned offices at night, waitressed weekends, sold Avon door to door. Whatever it took. Victoria's smile had gone razor thin. How very admirable. Richard topped off his wine. David's done remarkably well for himself, considering. The word hung in the air like smoke. Considering his background, considering his mother still said, wash, instead of wash, and thought buying off the rack was normal. I dabbed at my mouth with the linen napkin, real linen, heavy as gilt, and said, I'm just so proud of my boy. Always told him, doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish. And look at him now, marrying into such a fine family. Emily's cheeks pinked. She reached for David's hand across the table. Richard raised his glass. To family, he said. The toast felt like a verdict. Dessert was a deconstructed cheesecake that looked like it had lost a fight with a toddler. I exclaimed over it like it was the baby Jesus in the manger. When coffee was served, some single-origin pour-over nonsense that cost more per bag than my monthly electric bill used to, Victoria finally went in for the kill. Linda, dear, have you thought about where you'll live after the wedding? I know David and Emily are buying in Georgetown, but of course you're welcome to visit anytime. We have a lovely mother-in-law suite above the garage. It's quite private. The subtext was deafening. We will tolerate you, but only if you stay in your lane. I let my eyes fill with tears. Real ones. I'm very good at those when needed. Oh, Victoria, that's so kind. But I couldn't impose. I've got my little place in Richmond. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, but it's home. Roof leaks sometimes when it rains hard, but the neighbors are nice. Mrs. Gutierrez next door watches my cat when I'm gone. David looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Richard cleared his throat. Well, if you ever need anything, financial advice, perhaps, David knows we're always here. Translation. We will pay you to stay away. I pressed a hand to my chest. You all are just the sweetest things. I was so worried you'd think I wasn't good enough for our David. Victoria reached over and patted my hand, actually touched me this time, 2 quick taps like I was a dog who might bite. Nonsense, she said. Family is family. The lie hung between us like perfume. When we stood to leave, Victoria hugged me goodbye with the enthusiasm of someone embracing a porcupine. Richard shook my hand and said, drive safe, Linda. Those winter roads can be tricky. It was May. David walked me to the car. The second the door closed he exploded. Mom, what the hell was that? That, I said calmly, was me making sure your fiancé's family is worthy of you. He stared at me. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself. No, sweetheart, I said, buckling my seatbelt. I gave them exactly what they wanted to see. And they showed me everything I needed to know about them. He drove in silence for 10 minutes. Then, they're not usually like that. They're exactly like that, I said. They just hide it better when think someone might be useful. Another long silence. You're really not poor, he said finally. It wasn't a question. No, I said. I'm really not. How much? He stopped. Couldn't finish. Enough that I bought their bank last year, I said. Quietly. They still don't know. David pulled over on the side of the GW Parkway and put his head on the steering wheel. Mom, he said, voice muffled. What are you going to do? I looked out at the Potomac sliding past, black and smooth under the moon. I haven't decided yet, I said. But tomorrow night is the engagement party at the country club. And I'm going dressed as myself. He lifted his head. You're going to destroy them. No, I said. I'm going to give them the chance to destroy themselves. There's a difference. I leaned back against the leather seat that I'd paid for, closed my eyes, and started planning tomorrow's dress. The next morning I called my stylist, my jeweler, and the dealership that keeps my real car, a forest green Bentley Bentayga I never drive because it feels like wearing a billboard. I told them all the same thing. Tomorrow I wanted to look like who I actually am. David texted me 17 times before noon. The last one just said, please don't ruin this for me. I didn't answer. At 4 p.m. the Bentley pulled up outside my supposed little place in Richmond, which is actually a 12,000 square foot mansion on the James River that once belonged to a tobacco baron. My driver, Marcus, held the door while I climbed in wearing a floor-length emerald silk gown that cost more than most people's cars, diamonds at my throat heavy enough to anchor a yacht, and heels that could stab a man through the heart if necessary. Marcus caught my eye in the rearview. We doing this, ma'am? We're doing this, I said. The country club was lit up like Christmas in hell. Valets swarmed. Cameras flashed. Someone had tipped off the Washington Post Society page, because of course they had. I waited while Marcus opened my door, then stepped out into the glare looking like money that had learned how to walk. I heard the collective inhale. Richard Harrison was greeting guests at the entrance. He saw me and the glass of scotch in his hand slipped, shattered on the marble steps. Amber liquid ran between the cracks like blood. Linda, he said, voice cracking on the second syllable. Evening, Richard, I said, offering my hand. The diamonds caught the light and threw it back like a threat. Victoria appeared at his side, wearing the same cream silk as last night, now looking cheap by comparison. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You, she started. Clean up nicely. I finished. Yes, I do. Emily came running up in a blush pink gown, David trailing behind looking like a man walking to his own execution. Mrs. Thompson, Emily said, eyes huge. Call me Linda, darling. We're practically family. I smiled with all my teeth. David reached for my arm. Mom, can we talk privately? No, I said pleasantly. We're doing this publicly. It's more honest. I swept inside. The room was full of Washington's mid-tier elite, congressmen's wives, lobbyists, tech bros who'd gotten lucky once and thought it meant they were geniuses. They parted like the Red Sea when I walked through. At the head table sat the Harrisons and their closest friends. I walked straight to it. Mind if I join you? I asked, not waiting for an answer before sitting down in the chair meant for the mother of the groom. Richard recovered first. Linda, perhaps we should discuss how you offered me the mother-in-law suite above your garage. I said loudly enough for the tables around us to hear. Or how you assumed I was too poor to afford heat in winter. Or maybe we should talk about how your bank, my bank now, actually, has been overcharging veterans on their mortgages for 6 years running. The silence was so complete I could hear the string quartet sweating. Victoria had gone fish belly white. I don't know what you think. I know exactly what you were thinking, I said. You were thinking my son was a social climber who dragged in a hillbilly mother you'd have to hide in the attic. You were thinking you could buy me off with pity and a garage apartment. You were thinking bloodlines matter more than character. I stood up. The microphone from the toast station was right there. I picked it up. Good evening, I said to the room. Most of you know me as David's slightly embarrassing mother who brings casserole in Tupperware. Some of you have even been kind enough to offer me charity. Laughter rippled, nervous, but real. Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Linda Marie Thompson. I own Thompson Holdings. We own, among other things, the bank that holds the mortgage on this very country club. We own the company that insures Victoria's diamonds. I nodded at her throat, where her hand had flown, and we own the majority share in Harrison and Associates. Richard made a sound like a dying goose. Last night, I continued, I came to your home dressed as the woman you expected me to be. Poor, uneducated, grateful for scraps. And you treated me exactly the way you treat anyone you think is beneath you, with condescension, cruelty, and the assumption that money makes you better. I looked at Emily. She was crying silently, tears cutting through her perfect makeup. I wanted to see if you'd be kind to someone you thought had nothing to offer. You weren't. Not one of you. David stepped forward. Mom, please. I looked at my son, my beautiful, brilliant boy who still thought love meant ignoring red flags the size of circus tents. No, I said gently. This isn't about punishing them, David. It's about protecting you. I turned back to the room. Here's what's going to happen. Richard, you'll resign as chairman of Harrison and Associates by Monday. The board's already been informed. They're thrilled, actually. Victoria, your seat on the museum board. Gone. The Post is running a story next week about certain irregularities in the gala fundraising. Emily, she looked up, mascara running. You have a choice. You can marry my son knowing exactly who I am and what I'm capable of, or you can walk away right now and I'll write you a check for $10 million to make the embarrassment go away. But if you stay, you'll never treat another human being like you treated me last night. Not ever again. The room was dead silent. Emily looked at David. He looked back at her, eyes pleading. She wiped her face, stood up, and walked over to me. I'm so sorry, she said clearly. I was awful. I let them make me awful. If you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Then she hugged me. Actually hugged me, arms tight around my neck like a child. Something in my chest cracked open. I looked over her shoulder at David. He was crying too. Richard had sunk into his chair like all the bones had been removed. Victoria was staring into space like someone who'd just realized the yacht was on fire and the lifeboats were gone. I handed the microphone to the stunt events manager and walked out, Emily's hand in mine, David trailing behind us. In the car, nobody spoke for a long time. Finally Emily said, voice small, are you really going to take everything from my parents? No, I said. I'm going to give them the chance to earn it back. There's a difference. David laughed, a wet sound. You're terrifying. You have no idea, I said fondly. 6 months later, Emily moved into my Richmond house while David finished his notice at Harrison and Associates. He'd quit the day after the party. Richard took early retirement and spends his days golfing badly and writing apology letters I never read. Victoria volunteers at a women's shelter 3 days a week. She says it's court-ordered community service, but I think part of her actually starting to understand. Emily and I planted a vegetable garden together this spring. She burned the first 3 batches of green bean casserole, but the 4th one was perfect. We ate it on the terrace overlooking the river, just the 3 of us, paper plates and plastic forks because some traditions are worth keeping. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the fireflies come out, Emily leans her head on my shoulder and says, tell me again about the mines. And I do. The real stories this time. About my daddy coming home black-faced and coughing blood. About my mama taking in laundry until her hands bled. About how I swore my children would never know that kind of hunger. But I also tell her about the first million I made at 28, flipping condemned row houses in Baltimore. About the night I cried in the bathroom of the Ritz-Carlton because I was wearing a dress that cost more than my mother made in a year and still felt like an imposter. I tell her everything. Because family isn't about where you started. It's about who's willing to burn the world down to protect you, and who you'd burn it down for in return. And my family, we're just getting started.